Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Matt Taglia, Senior Director of Emerson College Polling. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Emerson has some new numbers out about the North Carolina Senate race for 2026. We are still more than a year away, but as of right now, what is the state of the race?
Well, the state of the race right now is that Cooper has a slight lead, but it is a significant lead. So 47% for former Governor Roy Cooper versus 41% for Whatley, the Republican challenger, with 12% undecided. So Cooper is posting a slight but significant lead here. And so, there is obviously still time. There are obviously still some undecided folks out there, but Cooper is in a decent spot right now.
I'm curious, why is Cooper in a decent spot right now? We know that he is the former governor. Whatley is the RNC, one of the RNC co-chairs. Why is Cooper ahead? Because as we know, back in 2024, Donald Trump won the battleground state of North Carolina.
That's right, he did win, but Cooper was a relatively popular governor for the state of North Carolina. We also saw that Josh Stein won the state in 2024 and is now the sitting governor. So right now, Cooper leads among independents by about 19 points. He leads with voters under the age of 50 by about 25 points. But I think the real story here, as far as why Cooper is ahead, is that favorability number. So when we look at the favorabilities, we see Cooper has 51% favorable versus 33% unfavorable. That's really high. So he has a majority who have a favorable opinion of him in the state. That's 53% among independents, even 27% among Republicans. So a quarter of Republicans have a favorable opinion of Cooper. You look at Whatley, on the other hand, he's at 17% favorable, 16% unfavorable, 66% have no opinion of him or don't know him. So that is the real number here. Folks just don't know who Whatley is necessarily. And that could absolutely change, obviously, as the campaigns wrap up. He'll introduce himself a little bit more to the state. But as it stands, he's at a real disadvantage without that name ID that Cooper has.
I mean, that's a huge number and a huge hurdle to overcome, right? 66% of people not knowing who you are in that state compared to the former governor. I want to talk, though, about that undecided block. I mean, how much do they matter? How much will they move the needle on this race?
They will matter. I will say 12% undecided is relatively low for being this far out. Remember, this is going to be in 2026, November 2026. But 12% of the electorate, that's not a huge chunk. So Whatley is really going to have an uphill battle here fighting for those undecideds. I think among those folks who are undecided, most of them probably don't have any idea who he is, despite being the former chair of the RNC and the former chair of the North Carolina Republican Party. He still has some work to do there, but there are definitely winnable folks out there. This isn't over, but all else being equal, I would certainly rather be Cooper.
And North Carolina is an interesting state, right? President Trump won by about 3% back in 2024, but there is now a Democrat governor who was just sworn in, Governor Josh Stein. So I want to talk about how North Carolina voters feel about each. First, start about President Trump. What's his approval rating in North Carolina?
And Trump is just about split here, 46% approve versus 44% disapprove. You look at independents, and it's a little bit more stark, though, 47% versus 33% who disapprove. Looking at Stein, 41% approve, 25% disapprove, and then about 35% don't have an opinion. But that is a really high number for him. He's got nearly a 20-point lead as far as approval. And among independents, we see 36% approve, 18% disapprove. So the Democratic brand is certainly not toxic in North Carolina. There are Democrats who have been elected statewide, who hold office statewide, and right now they have a positive approval rating.
And that's especially good news if you're Roy Cooper running for the Senate. Someone who is not running for re-election is Senator Thom Tillis. He's a two-term North Carolina Republican. That was supposed to be a really tight race. What is his approval rating there? Does North Carolina like him?
Yeah, and it's a little unfortunate for Tillis here. He's at 30% versus 43% who have a negative view of him. That's 41% negative among Republicans versus 35%, 43% negative among independents. So, unfortunately for Tillis, this is a case where he really made nobody happy. I think it would have been a real uphill battle fighting for re-election here. And so he's going to be leaving office with a low number, but it looks like he made the right decision.
And like you and I have talked about for really the past over a year now, the top issue facing voters heading into the 2024 election was the economy. And North Carolina was one of the battleground states. Actually, all of the battleground states in 2024 ultimately went to Trump, but that state was red in 2024. And the economy continues to be the top issue facing voters. How do voters in North Carolina feel about their financial situation now?
You're right, Brittany. It has been an issue. It continues to be an issue. 38% of North Carolinians say that the economy is their top issue, followed by immigration, threats to democracy at 19%, which we've seen a trend of both nationally and individually in some of these states, and then immigration and healthcare both at 10%. Drilling down a little bit and looking at folks' personal finances, we see that 40% say that their finances are worse now than they were a year ago. 28% say that they're better off. And then 32% say that it's about the same as a year ago. Voters over 60 are most positive here. Republicans are also more positive by about 12 points. As you'd expect, this is partisan. Democrats say that they are overall worse off than they were a year ago. And then independents also say that they're worse off by about 20 points.
And I also want to look ahead even further now, because you and I, if you can believe it, have already been talking about the 2028 Democratic primary as well as the Republican primary. When you asked Democrats and Republicans in North Carolina, who are they supporting for the presidential primary leading up to 2028?
Right. Yeah, so we'll start with Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg leads here, 17%. Kamala Harris at 12%, and then Governor Gavin Newsom at 10%. All others are at less than 10%, with 24% undecided. As you said, it is very early, but we see that Buttigieg does worst among Hispanic voters and Black voters. He does best among white voters and Asian voters. We've seen that trend somewhat across the country, and we definitely see that in North Carolina, where there is a higher percentage of Black voters than in a lot of other states. That's something that could ultimately end up hurting him in, say, South Carolina and some of the Super Tuesday states. But again, it's early. We're speculating a little bit, but we can see that data trend is continuing here. Looking at the Republican primary, it's sort of the same story as we've talked about before. We see J.D. Vance at 53%, and then all others are less than 10%. So once again, the field has sort of cleared for J.D. Vance. He appears to be the heir apparent. But again, things can change rapidly. 2016 was a very different story between 2015 and then ultimately in the primaries in 2016. There was things changed very quickly and very drastically too. So this is sort of the first real open contest that we've seen in quite a while. So I do expect things will change, but right now, as it stands, Vance is in the top spot.
And as things change, I hope you can come back on and break down the numbers with me. Matt Taglia, per usual, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany.